Touch, retreat, repeat. The push-pull of avoidant love. We've all been there. You meet someone and there's a spark. They draw you in. It's electric, magnetic, and then just when you start to get comfortable, they pull away. The texts get slower. The warmth cools. Suddenly you're analyzing messages, trying to figure out what changed. You're stuck in a confusing loop of touch, retreat, repeat. This is the emotional roller coaster of avoidant love. At first, it feels exciting. They show up with intensity, maybe even vulnerability. You start imagining a future. But the moment emotional closeness threatens their sense of control or autonomy, they pull back. Not because they don't feel something, but because they do, and it scares them. The avoidant isn't evil. They're protecting themselves. Somewhere along the way, they learnt that closeness is dangerous. So they dance in and out of intimacy like it's a fire they want to feel but not get burned by. Here's the catch. If you're consistently drawn to avoidant people, there's something in you that finds this pattern familiar or even addictive. You're not just responding to them, you're responding to the chase, the hope, the momentary highs that make the lows feel worth it. But here's what I need you to understand. Love isn't meant to feel like a gamble. You shouldn't have to earn someone's consistency. And the right person won't confuse you as much as they clarify your world. Stop trying to prove you're lovable to someone whose very pattern is based on emotional distance. Your value isn't measured by how long you can hold someone who keeps trying to escape. You don't win by making them stay. You win by choosing you and walking away from the push-pull. Because real love doesn't retreat when it feels real. It leans in. Avoidant love often begins with intensity. There's charm, attention, even moments of surprising vulnerability. You feel seen. You feel chosen. In the early stages, it can seem like something real is forming, something intimate and promising. But just as you begin to lean in, something shifts. They pull back. They don't disappear entirely. They just become harder to reach, emotionally and sometimes physically. The warmth you felt starts to fade. They seem distracted, distant, or emotionally unavailable, and you're left confused, questioning what went wrong and if you did something to cause the change. This is the hallmark of avoidant love. The cycle of emotional closeness followed by sudden retreat. It creates a rhythm that is as disorienting as it is addictive. When they retreat, it triggers your anxiety. You want to fix it, to regain the connection you felt at the start. So you reach out more. You analyze every text. You give more of yourself, hoping it will pull them back in. And often it does. For a moment, they return, affection resurfaces, and the cycle begins again. But it's never stable. Just when things feel safe, they pull away once more. This push-pull dynamic keeps you emotionally off balance. It creates a false sense of intimacy, one based not on mutual vulnerability, but on the emotional gaps you keep trying to close. You start mistaking anxiety for connection, mistaking effort for love. The unpredictability fuels your desire because you're constantly trying to get back to that initial high, that brief glimpse of closeness they offered you at the beginning. The better version of them only shows up sporadically and never for long. In a healthy relationship, closeness builds trust and safety. In avoidant love, closeness triggers fear and escape. This doesn't necessarily mean the avoidant partner doesn't care. They might feel deeply, but their instinct to protect themselves overrides their ability to sustain intimacy. They may crave love, but only on their terms and only at a distance they can control. So they touch, then retreat. They show just enough to keep you close, but never enough to let you truly in. The result is an exhausting emotional loop. You're constantly managing their moods, adjusting your expectations, and trying to hold on to a connection that keeps slipping through your fingers. And the longer you stay in this cycle, the harder it becomes to distinguish passion from pain and connection from chaos. When someone exhibits avoidant behavior in love, it's easy to label them as cold, indifferent, or even selfish. But that surface level interpretation misses the truth beneath the behavior. Most people who operate with an avoidant attachment style aren't trying to hurt others. They're trying to protect themselves. Avoidance is not a lack of feeling. It's a defense mechanism, often rooted in early experiences where vulnerability or emotional dependence felt unsafe, unreliable, or unreciprocated. For many avoidants, love was once a source of confusion, inconsistency, or even pain. Maybe they had caregivers who were emotionally distant, unpredictable, or overwhelmed themselves. Maybe they learned consciously or unconsciously that expressing needs led to rejection or shame. So they adapted, they learned to rely only on themselves, to stay in control of their emotional environment, and to keep others at arm's length to avoid disappointment. By the time they enter romantic relationships as adults, this self-protection has become deeply ingrained. Intimacy triggers anxiety, not because they don't want it, but because they associate it with loss of autonomy or emotional instability. When someone gets too close, their internal alarm system goes off. They start to feel trapped, smothered, or vulnerable. And instead of communicating their fear, they retreat, often silently. They may not even fully understand why they're pulling away. They just know something feels off. So they withdraw, distract themselves, pick fights, or disappear emotionally. Then when distance is reestablished, they feel safer. They re-engage, often with charm and affection, only for the same pattern to repeat the next time intimacy deepens. It's important to recognize that this isn't about a lack of care or malice. Many avoidant individuals genuinely want connection. They can be deeply loyal, loving, and sensitive, but only when closeness doesn't threaten their internal sense of security. Their behavior isn't driven by cruelty, it's driven by fear. They fear losing themselves in a relationship. They fear being engulfed, controlled, or exposed. And because they're rarely aware of the full scope of this fear, they project it outward. They blame the relationship for feeling too intense, too fast, too much, when in reality, it's their own unhealed wiring reacting to closeness. Understanding this helps shift the narrative. Instead of seeing the avoidant partner as heartless or manipulative, we begin to see them as someone struggling with intimacy in ways even they don't fully understand. But just because there's a reason for the behavior doesn't mean it's your job to fix it. When you find yourself consistently drawn to avoidant partners, it's worth asking a difficult but necessary question. Why? What is it about this dynamic, this push and pull, this emotional ambiguity that feels so familiar or compelling? It's easy to assume you're just falling for the wrong person, but often there's something deeper at play. You're not just responding to them. You're responding to a pattern that likely echoes something from your own emotional history. Many people who feel magnetized to avoidant partners grew up in environments where love had to be earned. Maybe you had a parent who was warm one day and withdrawn the next. Maybe you had to be good, helpful, or emotionally self-sufficient to get attention or praise. In those environments, love wasn't freely given. It was conditional. You learned that your needs were secondary or even inconvenient, so you adapted. You became good at reading moods, at shrinking yourself, at chasing scraps of affection. Now, as an adult, when you meet someone avoidant, someone who gives a little and then pulls away, your nervous system recognizes the pattern. It feels strangely familiar. It feels like home. Right? That familiarity can be mistaken for chemistry. The moments of closeness with an avoidant partner feel euphoric, not just because of the person, but because they temporarily relieve the anxiety their distance created in the first place. This creates a reward loop. You feel anxious when they retreat, then get a rush of relief and connection when they re-engage. Over time, you can become emotionally addicted to these high-low cycles. You start to interpret their occasional tenderness as proof that they care deeply, and their distance as something you need to fix by being more understanding, more patient, more lovable. What's happening beneath the surface is a reenactment of an old emotional script, one where your worth is tied to how hard you work for love. You're not consciously choosing emotional unavailability, but it speaks to an unresolved part of you that still believes love must be pursued, won, or rescued. That part of you feels alive in the chase, even though it also feels exhausted. Understanding this pattern isn't about blame, it's about awareness. When you see how your own emotional blueprint contributes to the dynamic, you reclaim your power. You stop romanticizing unpredictability. You start recognizing that real connection doesn't keep you in a state of emotional hunger. It meets you with presence, clarity, and safety. Not just occasionally, but consistently. In a healthy relationship, love isn't something you have to constantly chase or prove you deserve. It's not about performing, convincing, or negotiating for emotional availability. Real love shows up with consistency. It offers clarity. It doesn't leave you questioning your birth or second guessing every interaction. Yet when you're involved with an avoidant partner, it's easy to fall into a mindset where you believe you have to earn their attention, where being chosen feels like an achievement rather than a natural part of mutual connection. This belief often leads to unhealthy patterns of overperfection. You might find yourself excusing their distance, rationalizing their hot and cold behavior, or taking responsibility for the emotional tone of the relationship. You try harder, you over-communicate, you attempt to become more agreeable, more desirable, less demanding. Deep down, you may believe that if you just get it right, they'll finally choose you fully, finally show up the way you need. But that belief is a trap. It keeps you stuck in a dynamic where you're constantly giving more than. You're receiving, hoping your effort will compensate for their emotional absence. What's critical to understand is that love built on inconsistency creates anxiety, not intimacy. It keeps you in survival mode, hyper aware of every shift in mood, every delayed response, every subtle withdrawal. You end up in a near constant state of emotional vigilance, mistaking that intensity for depth. But intensity isn't the same as intimacy. One keeps you on edge, the other brings you peace. The right person, the emotionally available, grounded partner, doesn't make you beg for their presence. They don't weaponize silence or retreat as a way to regulate their own fears. They communicate, they show up, they create a safe space for mutual vulnerability where neither of you has to perform or protect. In this kind of relationship, love feels like an open door, not a locked one you have to keep trying to pick. Too many people waste years trying to prove they're lovable to someone who simply isn't ready or willing to receive love in a healthy way. But your value isn't determined by someone else's ability to see it. You don't become more worthy by tolerating emotional breadcrumbs. True connection doesn't come from overextending yourself to be enough for someone. It comes from finding someone who already sees you as enough, exactly as you are. When that happens, you realize that love isn't a puzzle to solve or a prize to win. It's a shared experience, not a performance. There's a deeply ingrained belief many people carry into relationships that if you just love someone enough, you can change them. Your loyalty, your patience, your willingness to wait will eventually earn you the connection you crave. When it comes to avoidant love, this belief becomes especially dangerous because the avoidant partner often shows just enough interest to keep hope alive. You begin to think that if you're just a little more understanding, a little less demanding, you can break through their walls. But this mindset turns love into a proving ground. And it keeps you locked in a relationship that's built on emotional scarcity. You might believe that if they stay, if they finally choose you, if they finally commit, it means you've won. It feels like validation, like your worth has been confirmed. But that's not love. That's a trauma loop. Real victory isn't about getting someone to stop running. It's about realizing you no longer need to chase. You don't need to earn love from someone whose pattern is built around withholding it. You don't need to convince someone to meet you emotionally. When you start to value peace over potential, clarity over confusion, and consistency over chemistry, something shifts inside you. You stop asking, how can I make them stay? And start asking, why am I still staying? Letting go of an avoidant relationship doesn't mean you failed. It means you chose self-respect. It means you stopped mistaking inconsistency for depth and started recognizing that emotional safety is not a luxury, it's a requirement. When someone's love feels like a moving target, it's not your job to keep chasing. It's your job to recognize that love at its core should feel like a place to rest, not a battlefield. You win by walking away, not in bitterness, but in clarity, not to prove a point, but to protect your heart. You win when you stop waiting for someone to stop running and start choosing someone who's already standing still, ready and open. That's not giving up, that's growing up emotionally. It's the moment you realize that love isn't about endurance, it's about alignment. It's not about convincing someone to see your value, it's about finding someone who never needed convincing in the first place. There's a quiet power in choosing yourself over chaos, in recognizing that what you're asking for, emotional presence, consistency, connection, is not too much. It's the bare minimum. And the right person will never make you feel like you have to apologize for wanting it. When you find yourself in a relationship with an avoidant partner, it's easy to believe that love is about proving yourself worthy, about chasing someone until they give in and choose you. But real love isn't about waiting for someone to come around or trying to fix them. It's about mutual respect, emotional availability, and connection that feels steady, not like a constant chase. It's important to understand that you're not here to convince someone to stay or to prove your worth. Love is meant to be something that enhances your life, not something that keeps you on edge, constantly trying to figure out what went wrong or if you're enough. You don't win by forcing someone to stay. You win by choosing peace, by walking away from the emotional turbulence and choosing to value your own emotional needs above the uncertain highs and lows. Remember, real love doesn't retreat when things feel real. It leans in, it stays, it's consistent. So don't settle for anything less than that. Choose yourself, choose clarity, and choose love that matches your value. Thank you all for being here and taking the time to listen. I hope this speech resonates with you and encourages you to rethink what you deserve in love. You are worthy of consistent mutual affection, not of emotional confusion or games. If this spoke to you, remember, you don't have to prove your worth. Love will meet you where you are when you stop chasing the wrong kinds of affection. Take care of yourselves, keep growing, and keep choosing what brings you peace. You deserve it. Thank you again.